Story 1: The Echoing Knock. I've lived in my current apartment for 3 years, and until last month, nothing strange ever happened. Then, the knocking started. It was around midnight when I first heard it, 3 distinct knocks coming from the front door. At first, I assumed it was someone in the hallway playing a prank, but when I opened the door, nobody was there. I brushed it off as my mind playing tricks on me. But the next night, it happened again, 3 sharp knocks, this time louder. Again, no one was there. I tried convincing myself it was just some late-night mischief from the neighbors. But the knocks continued every single night. No matter the time I checked, the hallway was always empty. The most unnerving part was how the sound began to follow me inside. One night, the knocking came from inside my bedroom closet. Another time, it came from under the bed. I searched everywhere, finding nothing. But that feeling, like someone was there with me, kept growing stronger. Desperate, I started staying up late, determined to catch the source of the noise. I even installed a camera near the front door. But each time the knocks echoed, the camera captured nothing. Just silence. Then last night, something changed. The knocking was different, slow, rhythmic, almost inviting. This time, it came from the bathroom mirror. As I stared into the reflection, I saw something. A shadow behind me. It was faint, almost like a trick of the light, but I swear I saw eyes staring back at me. I haven't slept since. The knocking is no longer just at night. I hear it during the day, at work, even in crowded places. It's as if something followed me, refusing to leave. Story 2: The Figure at the End of the Road. There's a long road near my house that's mostly surrounded by trees and farmland. It's a peaceful drive, especially at night when the only sounds are the crickets and the wind. I used to take that route home every night after work until something happened that made me change my habits. One evening, I noticed a figure standing at the far end of the road. It was unusual since there's nothing around there but open fields. As I got closer, I could make out the silhouette of a person, tall, with unnaturally long limbs. They didn't move, just stood there in the middle of the road, facing my car. I slowed down, thinking maybe they needed help, but something about them felt wrong. I couldn't see their face, just a shadowy outline. When I honked my horn to get their attention, they didn't react. They didn't flinch. They just kept staring, motionless. Against my better judgment, I decided to drive past them. The closer I got, the more I realized that their posture was off, too rigid, like a mannequin. But as I passed by, I felt the most intense wave of dread I've ever experienced. I looked in my rearview mirror, expecting them to still be standing there, but they were gone, vanished without a trace. The next night, I avoided that road entirely, taking a longer route home. But curiosity got the best of me a few days later. I drove down the road again. No one was there, but the unsettling feeling remained, like something was watching me. I've taken that road a few more times since, but every time, I feel that same fear creeping up on me, even though I haven't seen the figure again. I still wonder who or what it was, and why it was just standing there, and why I feel like it's still out there, waiting. Story 3: The Woman in the Attic. When my family moved into our old farmhouse, we knew it had a history. It was built in the early 1900s and had gone through several owners before us. The locals would tell us stories about how the place was supposedly haunted, but we laughed it off as small-town folklore. That changed the night I heard footsteps in the attic. It was late, and I was getting ready for bed when I heard someone walking above me. At first, I thought it was my dad checking something out, but when I looked, everyone was downstairs. No one else was up there. The footsteps were heavy, like someone wearing boots, pacing back and forth. They stopped abruptly, right above my room. I decided to check it out. Armed with a flashlight, I climbed the creaky attic stairs, fully expecting to find a raccoon or something. But when I opened the attic door, it was empty. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from the moon filtering through the tiny window. I walked around, shining my light in every corner, but nothing seemed out of place. Just as I was about to head back down, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner. It looked like a figure, a woman in a long dress, her back turned to me. I froze, convinced I was seeing things. But when I blinked, she was still there. I ran downstairs, heart racing, and tried to explain what I saw. My parents didn't believe me, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. But the footsteps continued. Sometimes at night, I'd hear whispering, like someone muttering under their breath, though I could never make out the words. Eventually, we had the attic sealed off. I've moved out since, but I'll never forget that woman. I still wonder what she was doing up there, and why she never left. As the midnight trains always were quick. The shadow for as long as I keep it down. I've loved taking late-night train rides. There's something calming about the empty cars and the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks. But one night, that peaceful routine was shattered. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was heading home after visiting some friends. The train car was nearly empty, just me and one other person sitting at the far end. I didn't pay much attention to them at first, focusing instead on the passing city lights. But as we approached the next station, I noticed something strange. The person hadn't moved the entire time. They just sat there, stiff and still, with their head tilted downward. I brushed it off, figuring they were asleep. But when the train stopped at the next station and the doors opened, I expected them to get up since it was a busy transfer point. They didn't. The doors slid shut, and we continued on our way, but the feeling in the car changed, heavier, almost oppressive. After a few more minutes, I couldn't shake the unease. I glanced back at the person, trying to get a better look. That's when I noticed something off. Their clothes seemed outdated, like they were from another era, an old-fashioned coat and hat that looked like they belonged in a black and white movie. But it was their face that made my stomach drop. I could only see part of it, but their skin was an ashen gray, and their eyes were open, wide, unblinking, and staring directly at the floor. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly looked away, trying to convince myself it was just a weird passenger. But then I heard a noise, a low, raspy whisper coming from the direction of the figure. It was too faint to understand, but the tone sent a wave of dread through me. I pulled the emergency stop cord, not caring how ridiculous it looked. When the train halted, I bolted out onto the platform, desperate to put distance between me and whatever that was. I turned back to see if the figure followed, but the train car was empty, completely empty, as if no one had been there at all. I took a cab home that night and haven't ridden the train since. I don't know who or what that passenger was, but I've convinced myself that it wasn't human. Story 5: The Shadows Under the Door. I used to work the night shift at a small office downtown. The building was old, and I was usually the only one there after 9 p.m. My job was pretty straightforward, but there was something about being alone in that place at night that always put me on edge. The first time I noticed the shadows was during a particularly quiet shift. I was sitting at my desk when I heard faint shuffling sounds coming from the hallway. I assumed it was just the old pipes or the building settling, but the sounds grew louder. I glanced toward the hallway, and that's when I saw it, something dark moving under the office door. It wasn't just a trick of the light. The shadow was distinct, like the shape of feet shifting restlessly on the other side. My heart started racing, and I immediately got up to check, hoping it was just a coworker I hadn't noticed. But when I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Just silence and flickering fluorescent lights. I told myself I was imagining things, but it didn't stop. Every night, around the same time, the shadows would return, sliding back and forth beneath the door, as if someone or something was pacing just out of sight. I tried ignoring it, but the unease gnawed at me. One night, I decided to stay late and see if I could catch whatever was causing it. I sat quietly, eyes fixed on the door, waiting. It didn't take long before I heard the familiar shuffling. The shadow appeared again, restless, almost agitated. But this time, something new happened. I heard breathing, ragged, uneven breaths, like someone struggling to stay calm. It was faint but unmistakable. I grabbed a flashlight and yanked the door open, fully expecting to confront someone. But there was nothing. Just an empty hallway that stretched into darkness. The shadows vanished the moment the door opened, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I quit that job shortly after. I couldn't handle the anxiety of working those late shifts anymore. Whatever was in that hallway, it wasn't just a figment of my imagination. I don't know what it was, but I can still hear those breaths in my nightmares.